The rain poured down in heavy sheets, drumming against the pavement as Emma clutched her worn-out coat tighter around her shivering frame. Her hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from the weight of the decision she was about to make. In her palm, she held the only thing left from a life she once cherished. A simple gold wedding band, slightly faded, but still carrying the warmth of the love it once symbolized. She glanced down at her son, Noah, his small body curled up inside a thin blanket, his face pale, his breath shallow. His fever had only worsened overnight, and she knew this wasn't something that would just go away on its own. He needed medicine, a doctor, something more than the silent prayers she had whispered in the darkness. But prayers wouldn't pay. The hospital bill, hope wouldn't buy the medicine. Her heart ached as she looked at the ring again. This was supposed to be forever, a reminder of the man she had loved, the man she had lost. Selling it felt like erasing a piece of their love, like letting go of the last part of him that was still tangible. But what choice did she have? A ring, no matter how precious, could never compare to the life of her child. With a deep breath, she stepped into the pawn shop, the bell above the door jingling softly. The air inside was warm, but it carried a heavy scent of dust and old memories. Behind the counter, an older man with kind eyes looked up from his newspaper. He studied Emma for a moment, noticing the way she hesitated, the way her fingers clenched around the ring as if it might disappear if she let go. "Can I help you?" he asked gently. Emma swallowed hard and forced herself to meet his gaze. I need to sell this," she said, placing the ring on the glass counter. The man picked it up, examining it under the dim light. He turned it over in his fingers, his experienced eyes reading the story behind it without needing to ask. A wedding band, well worn but well loved. A widow's desperation written in the way she fidgeted, in the way her voice quivered. "This belonged to someone special," he said softly. Emma nodded, her throat tightening. "My husband. He passed away 2 years ago." The man exhaled deeply, setting the ring down gently, as if it were fragile. "I'm sorry for your loss." She nodded again, barely able to speak. I need money for my son. He's sick, and I can't afford the hospital." Something shifted in the old man's face. Understanding, maybe even pain of his own. He picked up the ring again, weighing it in his palm before glancing at the cash register. "I can give you..." He paused, looking at her tired face, at the desperation in her eyes. "Wait here." Emma's heart pounded as he disappeared into the back room. Was he going to help her? Or was he going to offer her far less than she needed? She twisted her hands together, her stomach knotted with anxiety. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. Then the door swung open and he returned. But instead of handing her cash, he placed an envelope on the counter and pushed it toward her. "Take this." Emma hesitated. "What is it?" "Enough to get your son the help he needs." She blinked in disbelief. But the ring." The man shook his head. "Some things are worth more than money. Keep it." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she looked at the envelope, her fingers trembling as she reached for it. I don't know how to thank you." He gave her a small warm smile. "Just take care of your son. That's all the thanks I need." She clutched the envelope to her chest, unable to stop the sob that escaped her lips. Kindness like this, unexpected, life-changing, was rare. And yet, here it was, right when she had almost lost hope. But as she turned to leave, overwhelmed with gratitude, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man's kindness. Something unsaid lingered in his expression, something deeper than just generosity. and she was about to find out, Emma stepped out of the pawn shop, her hands clutching the envelope, as if it might disappear if she let go. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the cold still clung to her, soaking through her thin coat. She pulled it tighter around herself and hurried down the street toward the clinic, every step feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter, because for the first time in days, there was hope. Heavier, because she couldn't stop thinking about the old man behind the counter. His kindness had saved her, but something about the way he looked at her, like he knew exactly what she was going through, stuck with her. She hadn't even asked his name. Noah stirred in her arms, his small fingers gripping onto her coat. His forehead was still burning, his breath coming out in shallow little puffs. "Mama." His voice was weak. "We're almost there, baby," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his damp curls. "Just hold on." The clinic was small, but the bright fluorescent lights inside made it feel warmer than the world outside. A nurse glanced up as Emma rushed in, her face lined with exhaustion, but softened by sympathy when she saw Noah. "Please," Emma gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "My son, he's burning up." The nurse nodded quickly, guiding her to a chair as she called for the doctor. Within minutes, Noah was taken from her arms and into the examination room, leaving Emma standing there, cold and empty. She sank onto an tile, a plastic chair in the waiting area, her hands gripping the envelope tightly in her lap. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a little money. It was more than she had even dared to hope for. Enough to cover the doctor's fees, the medicine, even a little extra for food and rent. Her heart pounded. Why would a stranger do this? Before she could think too much, the doctor called her in. "He's very dehydrated and his fever is dangerously high," he explained, his voice calm but serious. "We'll get him stabilized, but he needs to be monitored closely. If you had waited any longer..." He didn't finish the sentence, but Emma knew she had almost lost him. Tears blurred her vision, but this time, they weren't just from fear. They were from relief. Noah slept soundly that night, his fever finally breaking. Emma sat beside his bed, running her fingers through his damp curls, whispering silent thank yous to the universe, to God, to the stranger who had saved them. But the questions wouldn't leave her mind. The next morning, when Noah was well enough to go home, Emma found herself walking back toward the pawn shop. She didn't even know what she was going to say, but she had to go. The bell jingled as she stepped inside. The old man looked up from behind the counter, as if he'd been expecting her. "You came back," he said, with a small smile. Emma swallowed. "I don't understand. Why did you help me?" The man leaned on the counter, his gaze distant, lost in something far away. "Because once, a long time ago, someone helped me." Emma frowned, waiting. "I lost my wife when my daughter was just a baby," he said after a pause. His voice was steady, but his eyes held a sadness that hadn't faded with time. "I had nothing. No money, no family, just a little girl who needed me. I was desperate. I came to a pawn shop, just like this one, ready to sell the last thing I had, my wedding ring." Emma's breath caught. But the owner, he wouldn't take it. Instead, he gave me enough to start over, enough to keep my daughter safe. The man's lips pressed together, his fingers brushing against the glass counter. "I never forgot that kindness. And when I saw you standing here yesterday, I saw myself." Emma felt something tighten in her chest. "What happened to your daughter?" she asked softly. The man's expression darkened. "She grew up, made a life of her own, but she doesn't speak to me anymore." He let out a heavy sigh, shaking his head. "Life doesn't always turn out the way you hope." Emma wanted to say something, but she didn't know what. She knew pain, She knew loss, but she also knew what it meant to hold on, even when everything felt broken. "I don't know how to repay you," she whispered. "You don't have to," he said simply. "Just promise me, when you see someone in need, you'll do the same." Emma nodded, her throat tight. She turned to leave, but as she reached the door, she stopped. A thought struck her, something that hadn't crossed her mind before. "What's her name?" she asked. The man hesitated, then finally said, "Lily." Emma nodded, and as she walked out into the world again, she knew this wasn't the end of their story. Because some kindnesses don't just save lives, they come back around. Days passed, but Emma couldn't stop thinking about the old man and his daughter, Lily. There was something in his voice, in the way he hesitated before saying her name, that stayed with her. He had saved her and Noah without hesitation, yet here he was, alone, carrying the weight of a broken relationship. One evening, as Noah slept peacefully beside her, Emma sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the envelope. The money had been a miracle, but the kindness behind it was something far greater. She thought about the man's words, how he had once been in her shoes, how a stranger had helped him, how he had never forgotten. Maybe it was time for someone to return the favor. She didn't know where to start, but the name Lily stuck in her mind. After asking around town, she finally got a lead. Lily worked at a small bookstore on the other side of the city. Emma hesitated before stepping inside. The place smelled of old paper and fresh coffee, the kind of warmth that made you want to stay a little longer. Behind the counter, a woman in her early 30s sorted through a stack of books. She had the same kind eyes as the old man, but there was something guarded in them, something distant. Emma took a deep breath. "Excuse me, are you Lily?" The woman looked up, surprised. "Yes?" Emma shifted on her feet. I don't mean to intrude, but I met someone recently. Someone who cares about you a lot." Lily's expression hardened. "Let me guess. My father." Emma nodded slowly. "He misses you." Lily let out a quiet laugh, but there was no joy in it. "It's been years. Why would he care now?" Emma hesitated before speaking. "Because people make mistakes, and sometimes they don't know how to fix them." Lily's fingers tightened around the book she was holding. "He was never there when I needed him. Not really. And when I finally got tired of waiting, I walked away. He let me." Emma understood that kind of hurt. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that settles deep inside you. But she also saw the look in the old man's eyes when he talked about his daughter. "He didn't let you go," Emma said softly. "He just didn't know how to hold on." For the first time, Lily's tough exterior cracked just a little. She didn't say anything, but she didn't push Emma away either. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. "This is the pawn shop's address. He's there every day." She set it on the counter. "Maybe just go see him. You don't have to forgive him, but maybe. Just give him a chance." Lily stared at the paper for a long moment. Emma didn't wait for an answer. She just gave her a small nod and left. Days passed, and Emma tried not to think too much about it. She had done what she could. The rest was up to them. Then, one afternoon, as she walked past the pawn shop with Noah's small hand in hers, she slowed. Through the window, she saw something that made her heart stop. Lily was there, standing across from the old man. They weren't hugging, and they weren't laughing, but they were talking, really talking. The old man's eyes were filled with something Emma had never seen in them before. Hope. Emma smiled and kept walking. Some kindnesses don't just change lives, they bring them back together.